vetting and approval process in Parliament for ministers and deputy ministers came to a close. The curtains have been drawn on that. We are now, the president has his full complement of ministers and deputy ministers. But this entire process in the last, 6 months or so, hasn't been without some very unique, interesting controversies. But for us here on PM Express, you can boil it all down to two binary questions. Is it a question of simple politics or a question of the national interest in the decision by members of parliament to either approve or disapprove? That is a conversation we're going to have tonight. If you haven't observed yet, something happened tonight that I guess highlights this whole controversy that we're beginning to talk about. There was a minority walkout when 4 deputy ministerial designates, they came to the floor for the House to discuss, debate, and approve or reject. When the names came, the committee, the appointments committee had indeed recommended that they be approved, right? But the minority had significant concerns. We'll tell you what their concerns are shortly. They insist that they don't want to be part of a process to approve ministers that they did not vet, which is quite actually a very interesting scenario, that the minority members on the appointments committee say they didn't participate in the vetting of these ministers. And here are the ministers: Diana Sonabadapa, Office of the Attorney General, the deputy. We have Zuira Abudu, who is a gender, deputy minister designate to the gender ministry. Now, of course, has been approved, waiting for swearing in. We have Marty J. Mensah, the local government deputy minister, heading to the local government. And then Amadou Chinia Isahaku, sanitation. I mean, the question really is, how is it possible that the vetting committee, the appointments committee, as it's so properly called, will sit, and yet the minority members will not be part of the vetting of these individuals? It had to do with what they believe to be the disrespect shown to the Speaker of Parliament. Let's explain this further. The majority, meanwhile, has dismissed the demands by the minority for reverting of the 4 deputy ministers. That's quite also a very novel request, that they have been vetted once, right? Vet them again. Why? They claim they were not present. This is the minority's concern, that they were not present for the vetting because the Speaker had asked them to go plant trees, right? And declared June 11 a no-sitting day. That is a minority's position on this matter, that we were asked to go for a national assignment. We had gone to plant trees, and yet, while the Speaker had said don't sit, the majority side of the appointments committee sat surreptitiously, right, as they say, Nicodemously, and then vetted these 4 nominees. Is that really what happened? We'll get into that tonight. But that is why tonight, on the floor of Parliament, a few hours ago, the minority members staged a walkout, led by James Kluti-Abdji, who is a deputy minority leader. They didn't want to be part of it. So what happened? The majority side approved the 4 nominees. But this is not the only time in the last few months we've seen this major controversy around nominees to be vetted and approved by Parliament. We've seen several of them. In fact, for the very first time, we have a case where somebody had resigned from the appointments committee because of the controversies. And I'm talking about Samuel Kujeta Blakwa. It's been so controversial that members are resigning from the committee. In fact, not only that, we've had minority members breaking ranks, right? Suhini had gone public with his own concerns about Gift to Chuma Mpofo, saying he will not be voting for them. His other colleagues can choose to do so, but he won't vote for the members. And indeed, they had demanded last week that until some outstanding issues are addressed, they're not going to be part of this. As we see, it's panned out that they've again lost. But what really is happening on this matter? Again, we go back to previous instances of same issues playing out. We had these 3 designates, right now substantive ministers. They were vetted, their confirmations were then put on ice, right? And then the minority raised all manner of questions about their eligibility to hold the office, your qualification, and the other questions that had come up are their vetting. In her case, questions about her firing a gun in a public place. In his case, questions about business interests he had. In his case, other questions have again been raised. And then the minority says, we're not going to allow that. So they put that on ice. But what happened? When it came down to the real deal, all of them sailed through. All of them sailed through. And these are the numbers in terms of the voting, right? And so you begin to ask the question, I mean, if indeed there are genuine concerns about the candidates, all of them must have gone through for you. If there are genuine concern about these candidates, how really come, if you are pursuing the national interest, that you will still have, sometimes both sides of the house, after their concerns have been laid forward, voting to approve them? I mean, where do you draw the line between playing the politics and promoting the national interest in the matter, right? We'll come to that. Or is it simply the minority members raising concerns that are not really, enough to disqualify a nominee in that sense, and that these are frivolous concerns that they've raised? And so by the time the real deal comes to vote on the matter, the majority sees through it and it passed them. But we need to get into that because it's the job of vetting is a critical one. So it has to do with the finance minister, the man who controls the purse. The minority raised all manner of concerns about him, and yet when the chips were down, they declared him. Again, we need to ask those questions. Are all these concerns, evaporating into things? We need to examine this, especially now that the process has ended, and look at that distinction between the politics that is being played and the national interest. My guests are joining me tonight as we delve into this all-important matter. Trust me, it is critical. It is absolutely critical. Are these concerns valid enough? Or as it's turned out, because all of them went through, the parliament simply did a rubber stamp, as many have said? Or this is something more at play here? Join me after the break as we get into these matters. My guest tonight, Joseph Owusu, he is the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, but in this particular context, he's speaking to us as a chairman of the Appointments Committee in Parliament, also MP for Bekwai. Also joining us is his colleague in leadership, James Kluche Aveji, who is a Deputy Minority Leader. He's also the MP for Ketu North. We're also joined, I'm delighted to say, by Dr. Rashid Ramdeen, who is Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. I want to start with you, Mr. Aveji. How is it possible that, as I've heard today, that a whole appointments committee will sit in public on live television and vet 4 different appointees without the knowledge of the minority?
Thank you very much. Good evening to our cherished viewers. Evans, I think that the chairman of the Appointment Committee will be the best person to respond to this question. Committee meetings are usually held by the chairman of the committee, and members of the committee will be informed. Venue of the meeting is given, and then time to attend the meeting is also given, and the purpose or objective of the meeting is also given. So if the appointment committee could meet and vet 4 people without the knowledge of the minority members of the committee, the chairman of the committee is the best to respond. But what happened was, on the 11th of June, which was the National Tree Planting Day, on Thursday, 10th June, the Speaker directed the clerk to Parliament to provide means of transport. Let me put it this way, means of transport to every member of Parliament to go to their constituencies and take part in the National Tree Planting exercise. So with this directive, if all members of parliament are to comply with this directive, it means that no member of parliament will be attending upon either the committee meeting or any other business, because the House will not be sitting on that day. So expect that no committee will also sit, because the Speaker directed that we should all go to our various constituencies to take part in the exercise. So if the chairman could call a meeting and probably inform only the majority members of the committee that come, let's do the business, then he's the best person to respond to this question. Evans.
Thankfully, Joe Owusu is on. Mr. Joe Owusu, is that what happened? That you called the meeting and only the majority side, your side, knew about it to vet members of nominees who had come before you? Kindly please unmute your Zoom for me.
Okay, no, that's not true. That's not what happened. You would recall that the committee advertised the entire program, the dates and the nominees to be vetted on each of the days. They were fully advertised prior to the starting of the whole process of consideration. However, on the Thursday, the day before the Friday, which we did the nomination, which is in the consideration, which is in contention. In the morning, whilst in the at the appointments committee, the minority leader informed me that Mr. Speaker had decided that Parliament should not sit the following day. So we may have to reschedule those we had programmed to appear before us on the Friday. Within 15 minutes after he told me that, the majority leader also came to the committee meeting, and I asked him about what I'd heard from the minority leader, because nobody had informed the committee of that. Then the majority leader said, oh, the appointments committee is exempted from this holiday. This was to the hearing of the minority leader. And indeed, he used a word for which my minority leader also commented, and we laughed over it. But at the close of proceedings on Thursday, I asked members to hold a meeting and take a decision as to what I have been informed in private, what we will do about that. I must confirm that at that meeting, the minority leader, who is the ranking member, and his deputy, who is the chief whip, had left the meeting, the appointments committee meeting, apparently going with Mr. Speaker to go and see the chief imam. But the other members of the committee on the minority were at the meeting. When the two of them left, Honorable Neil Van der Poy was appointed as the acting leader, and he sat through that meeting with us. There were, I think, 4 more of the members of the minority side and 5 from my side. And we all individually agreed that, in view of the fact that the nominees had people they had invited who had come, and it's likely that any of us would travel anyway, we agreed to come. All of us, both sides of the house, agreed to come. Now, subsequent to that, around 7:30, the Honorable Minority Chief Whip, who is the deputy ranking member of the committee, called me that, oh, he has heard that we have decided to sit on Friday. And I said, yes, we met after the meeting and we all agreed to sit. They said, oh, the minority leader, that is the ranking member, told him that he had told me not to sit, and said, yes, he suggested that Mr. Speaker has granted a holiday, so we should not sit. But in his presence, the majority leader said, no, we are exempted. And the committee itself decided that we will sit. They said, well, yes, then they will not join me. That was around 7:30. The committee had closed, every member had left. And truly, the Friday, none of them came. So it is not that a decision was taken behind them or that the date was fixed without their knowledge. No. The date was originally published many weeks before and it was all agreed, all of us. We negotiated at a Zoom meeting like this, and we agreed on the date and time we will sit, and we drew the program and advertised it. But this holiday was announced in the chamber. We were at the committee. Nobody informed us. It is the minority leader who said that the speaker had told him before he even didn't go to the chamber. So he said the speaker had told him in the morning. But the committee agreed that notwithstanding the said holiday, we would sit. So is there anything done behind them? No.
I mean, Mr. Veji, if what I'm hearing is true and people's names have been mentioned from your side, that is easy to verify. You didn't verify all this before the decision to walk out today on such an important decision by the House on 4 nominees?
Thank you, Evans. Decision to walk out is not my decision as an individual. It's a decision of the entire caucus of the minority. So, yes, the directive by the Speaker was made on the floor. In fact, I was present that day on the 10th of June when the Speaker made a directive. The Speaker did not, on the floor of the House or in the chamber, indicated that a committee or a number of committees are exempted. So I'm hearing it for the first time from the chairman of the committee, maybe because I'm not a member of the committee of the appointment committee. So I'm not aware of that. So with the majority leader informed the chairman and the minority leader that the appointment committee is exempted, it is not something that is known to probably the entire House, because the Speaker, in giving the directive, did not exclude anybody from the directive that said all members of parliament, and he even directed the clerk to provide transportation to enable members of parliament to go back to their various constituencies and take part in the tree planting. So this is an information that I am hearing for the first time. But again, the decision to walk out, it's a collective decision of the minority side of the House, because we've not been part of the vetting. Why should we take part in the approval? We did not know what went on into that vetting. So the members of the minority on the appointment committee, because they did not attend that vetting, cannot tell whether the nominees are qualified. So the best thing to do is to abstain. And that is why we walk out. We don't want to be part of that. So that is what happened. That is what happened.
But that fundamental reason, as the chairman had just explained, that there was a meeting at which your minority members were present, and they took a collective decision that we are going to sit. The committee was going to sit. I mean, some may look at this and say the minority guys simply shirked your responsibility.
No, as I said, I have not been a member of the appointment committee. I am not a member of the appointment committee. I'm not privy to that information which the chairman of the committee is giving us out now. I am not saying that what he's saying is not true, because what he said could be true, but we have taken the collective decision that for the fact that we did not participate in the vetting of these nominees, it should not be fair on our side to say they have qualified. You have not vetted the people. How will we know that they have qualified? That is why we abstain by walking out of the chamber, so that they can do their own thing. Because they vetted the nominees, they know how competent they are, whether they are qualified or not, they know, and they have passed them. So it means that to them, they have qualified. If we stay on the floor and participate in that debate, we wouldn't know what to do, because we did not vet them and we don't know their competence.
I wonder, since this came up, has there been, because again, let's put it bluntly, you have a Speaker of Parliament who is from the stock of the opposition NDC, which is the first time in our fourth Republican history. I wonder if there have been formal representations to him on these concerns, because this happened weeks ago. So I'm wondering whether there's been formal representations to him as a speaker to try and address this before today.
I will not be able to know, but what I've been told also is that a proposal was made to the chairman of the committee, whether it is true or not, that these 4 members be re-vetted with the minority members be present. And that was also turned down. So that some representation was made, but not to the speaker, but to the chairman of the committee.
Mr. Joso, was there that formal request made to you?
No. Well, I heard it was a suggestion made at their committee, but today, at the pre-sitting meeting, the minority chief, Honorable Muntaka, made that suggestion to Mr. Speaker, and we all laughed it off because we know it is not practicable. He made that suggestion, but Mr. Speaker made a comment, how is that possible? And we all laughed it off. But I don't know whether it was there was a formal request made to him prior to this meeting. But today's pre-sitting meeting, yes, Honorable Muntaka actually made that suggestion to Mr. Speaker, but I'll say the Speaker didn't agree with him that it can be revetted now.
Substantively, I mean, his argument is we didn't participate in the vetting, and factually they did not. For whatever reason, we all know it's controversial, but because of that, we cannot be part of the approval. Do you have any sympathies for that position?
You know, in Parliament, on all decisions, what you look out for is quorum. Does the appointment committee have a quorum to proceed? If yes, other committees, we don't dissect to see which members or what members were present or not present. A quorum to take a decision was what was necessary. Once there was a quorum to take a decision made is a decision of the committee. It's the same thing at plenary. Once there's a decision there's a quorum to take a decision made is a decision of Parliament, irrespective of who were present. So I think that we are stretching who was present or who was not present. It's okay for me. I don't really have a problem if for maybe some principal position that we did not participate in the consideration, so we will not participate in the approval. I will not quarrel with them as long as Parliament is not disabled from performing its function. So,
I mean, there are bigger issues involved.
I don't really have a problem with that. There are times that on major issues, one side or the other have decided not to participate, but the decision is binding on the country. I recall that when health insurance, the decision on the health insurance was being taken, some members of one side of the House walked out, but the decision was taken. So as long as Parliament has a quorum to take the decision, then the decision taking is a decision of Parliament.
I mean, there are fundamental issues that this raises, because again, these are representations, representatives of the people. One of the biggest jobs the Parliament can do is to vet, scrutinize, and approve these nominees and check their qualifications and eligibility for the jobs. Dr. Rashidrahman, Executive Director, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, you work with parliaments all across Africa, including our parliament. What's your reading into all that has happened? And this is just the latest, right? We've had several in the last few months in this particular life of this parliament. There are a lot of unprecedented things that happened with the vetting, the back and forth. I mean, now one-sided vetting. What does this say about the way the parliamentary system works with the vetting and approval process that we've seen this year?
Thank you very much, Evans, and a very good evening to Mr. Speaker and then Honorable Aviji. You know, the work of the Appointments Committee, I think, is one of the most important in the life of our Parliament. it's a very noble exercise, one that sets our country apart from most of the countries that I know and all the parliaments that I have worked with on the continent. Many times I have had delegations coming from different countries as guests of our center, and whenever they are in Ghana and their visit coincides with the work of the appointments committee, they always shower a lot of praise on how progressive our parliamentary democracy is. But if you observe very carefully and closely, I think over the years, an exercise that is supposed to, if you like, be the first point of exacting accountability from those we are going to entrust with power and resources, is gradually, becoming too political instead of being, like you said, an exercise in the interest of the nation. And I say this, with regard to the conduct of both parties over the years, because we have seen this. This is not happening only when the MPP is in power. I mean, we've seen this happen before. So I think, just like it happens in many places, this exercise is taken very, very seriously. And you have even sometimes independent investigative and security agencies working for Parliament and working for the committee in advance of some of these hearings, just to make sure that we have the right people to do the job that His Excellency the President is entrusting to them. We've not seen a lot of that in terms of progress in our country. Rather, most of the time, what we see is a lot of drama that characterizes the work of the committee. I know honorable members are politicians, and we can't take away some element of politics from their work. But as much as possible, I think what we are expecting as Ghanaians is that, this exercise should rather be one that takes the national interest very, very seriously. Let me come to this recent one. What I hear from the two honorable members and the communication from the Right Honorable Speaker, I think the impression I get is that either there was no clarity in the communication, or maybe there was an attempt to perhaps maybe sidestep the communication. Because if the Right Honorable Speaker says, all parliamentary work is suspended for a particular day, and then you hear others saying something that is different, and then you hear a committee meeting to decide what to do. I don't know. It's a question that perhaps you might have to put to the honorable members. I mean, whose word should be final in the scheme of things when we are running Parliament? I think that's a question that maybe the two honorable members would have to answer. Is it the word of the Right Honorable Speaker, or is the word of the minority leader, or is the word of the majority leader, or is the word of the committee, as the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker has said? They met as a committee and decided. So in some places, somebody would say maybe this is a violation of the order given by the Right Honorable Speaker. But of course, the Deputy Speaker has said, the majority leader has indicated that they were exempted. I mean, do we have the records for that? I mean, did the Hansard capture that some group was exempted from going to plant trees? A very important national exercise, by the way. So I think these are matters that we need to interrogate. Yeah,
I mean, for me, you've raised the questions. I think it's important to clarify this because we have the two honorable gentlemen with us. Mr. Aveji, the Parliament is a house of records. On the floor, when the Speaker gave his directive, was there an exemption made?
No, there wasn't any exemption made.
Okay.
There was no exemption. So if the majority leader communicated to the chairman of the appointment committee that the appointment committee are exempted, we don't know whether that was something communicated to the majority leader by the Speaker of Parliament or not. So, as said by Dr. Draman, it's something that needs to be interrogated.
But let me ask you this: what is the accepted procedure if indeed
that exemption wasn't made?
Okay, so let me ask for clarity on this. If indeed there was an exemption, would it have still been valid if the Speaker had said it out of the chamber in a private conversation? Is that how parliamentary procedure works?
What I know is that if there is an exemption, the Speaker would have communicated that exemption on the floor as he communicated the directive to members. He would have said that the appointment committee are exempted from this exercise. But that didn't happen, which means that by implication, every member, the 275 members of Parliament, are instructed by Mr. Speaker to go to their constituencies to take part in the tree planting.
I mean, Mr. Joseph, if it's factual, and I think you haven't disputed the fact that indeed was said, the Speaker made this directive on the floor. If your colleague majority leader tells you beyond what was said on the floor, that is hearsay and may not necessarily amount to what had actually been captured on the records, that could pose a problem.
You see, I've explained earlier that I was not on the floor. Okay. I didn't go to the floor. The Appointments Committee sat before the proceedings in Parliament began. So what I heard was by the word of mouth of the minority leader and a different version from the majority leader. Okay. Right? So what actually was said on the floor of the House, I didn't hear it. Okay. But let me add that on the Friday, while the Appointments Committee was sitting, Mr. Jetro, the acting deputy clerk, called me on phone and said that Mr. Speaker says that I should join him in Parliament, Accra, to plant trees. That myself and the second deputy should join him to plant trees on the floor of Parliament, in the presence of Parliament, which we did. You know, so if he was expecting that all of us would be out of Accra, it would have been strange that he would also expect that his deputies would join him to plant trees in the presence of Parliament. And I'm sure your reporters recorded that it did happen. As I said, I actually suspended the Appointments Committee meeting after we had considered one and came to join him. And if I recall correctly, Honorable Veji himself was at the presence of Parliament. If I recall correctly, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that we joined Mr. Speaker to plant trees in the presence of Parliament. So this alleged, I'm using alleged, directive that all members should leave Parliament. I find it's inconsistent kind of instructions I got from the Clerk of Parliament leading to the presence of Parliament.
I mean, let's attempt to address the bigger questions that this raises. And I want to start with you, Ms. Osewusu, because you've been the chair of this committee before, in the last Parliament that expired, in January, on January 7th. Let me ask you, having superintended over the process in the last few months, compared to what you witnessed before when you were the chair, what's your own assessment of the performance of the committee as it relates to the conduct of your members on the other side in doing this all-important job of vetting these nominees and recommending the approval? Are you happy with the outcomes?
Yes. I've been a member of the Appointments Committee since I joined Parliament in 2009. Indeed, it is this appointment committee that has most cooperated, negotiated at every step, worked out consensus. It involves give and take discussions because we are even at the committee. So none of us can use his majority or minority to bully the other, to get your way. So at every step, we have negotiated what to do. Indeed, in the fifth parliament, we didn't get it that way. Honorable Doajaho was the chairman. When he decides, that's it. Indeed, on many occasions, the minority leader then, the current majority leader, challenged his decisions on the floor of the House. At the committee, in the face of TV. In the sixth parliament, members of the minority then did not participate in the proceedings at all of them. Then in the seventh parliament, when I became chairman, there was one Saturday which the minority said that we were overworking them because we were sitting too many times. So on that particular day, they won't come. We should reschedule that Saturday. We refused to reschedule. So they didn't come. Proceedings went ahead. We did embroider the report, and they participated in the decision on the floor of the House. So this is novel. This is the first time they have raised this matter, that because we did not participate in the discussion, in the consideration, we will not participate in the decision. But for me, we shouldn't stretch that matter too much. As I said, even if they sat in and did not vote, it will still be their right. They could have abstained. They could have just refused to make comments. So what is did not breach the rules of party and the constitutional requirements. For me, I think that's the most critical part. As to participation, there are times that one side or the other have a reason to use refusal to participate to raise attention or to bring a certain particular issue onto the fore. As long as the right is not taken away from them by force, but they elect not to. It is all one of the parliamentary practices, one of the means by which one side or the other may use to raise an issue or raise an objection or bring out a matter which they think is being overlooked.
I want to take a break. When I return, there's a bigger conversation that has been raised, particularly in the last few months, also because of the unique strength of the minority side this time in this parliament. Historically, we've never had this, strength balance in the House, even on the appointments committee. And there's a school of thought that before the vetting process began with the first batch of ministers, that people were very hopeful that for the first time we will not see the traditional rubber stamping of the appointees, because the minority will use their strength to exact some form of accountability, and possibly some of the appointees may be rejected. As we close this chapter on the appointment, that hasn't transpired, and there are many who are left disappointed and accuse the minority of squandering this great opportunity the voters handed them as manifested in the vetting. I will take Mr. Klucha Veji's take on that, as he himself has witnessed from the rank and file and the foot soldiers of the party who were upset, angry almost, at how some of them perceived the minority side failed them in holding some of these ministers accountable and possibly using their numbers to reject them. We'll try and examine that one return, and I'll get Dr. Dramani's thoughts on that too. Stay with me. My guest still on PM Express tonight, James Klucha Veji, is a deputy minority leader, MP for Ketu North. Also with me is Joso Usu, who is a chairman of the Appointments Committee in Parliament, MP for Bekwai, and I'm happy that Dr. Rashidrahman, Executive Director, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, is also with us. Let me ask you, Mr. Klucha Veji, what do you say to those who say in the unique powers that your constituents gave you, Ghanaians gave you, you have grossly squandered in the last few months, and this vetting process has exposed the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness of the minority. What would you say to that?
Evans, before I respond to that question, let me correct the impression created by the chairman of the appointment committee earlier on. On the 11th of June, I wasn't in Parliament, so I did not take part in the tree planting in Parliament. Probably you might have seen somebody who resembles me. So, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't there on the 11th of June. Just to correct that. Just to correct that impression. But probably people would think that I was there. I wasn't there. Now, Evans, responding to your question, I think that the opportunity given to us as minority by the people of Ghana, where we now have an even parliament, which we call a hung parliament, for the fact that the independent member decide to work with the majority side or the NPP side, making them the majority now. It's for a term of 4 years. So I will not agree with you by that description that we have missed the opportunity or squandered the opportunity. We have 4-year term. We're going to utilize our strength as minority in many things yet to come.
But some say this is the biggest. Some say this is the biggest test, and you failed it.
No, as I said, it's regrettable, and our support base have lambasted. Let me put that way: lambasted members of parliament from the minority, and we have accepted that. So let's put that one behind us. Let's forge ahead and see how best we can use our strength to ensure that the current parliament we have now bring benefit to the people of Ghana, and for that matter, everybody, than to go back and be looking at those feces that are dried. No, we have discussed it over and over, and we have forgotten about it. So let's not resort them. It's regrettable, so let's just put it aside. But just to assure our members that we have been given 4-year term with a parliament of 137 plus 1. Probably after the court cases that are running, probably the numbers might change or not, we don't know. So let's hope that the more years ahead of us, we can utilize it to their benefit rather than to go back and be reminding ourselves with those wrongs.
I mean, Dr. Drahman, has the minority side met your expectations with the way they've performed with the vetting?
No, and I think I have had an occasion to say this several times. But as Honorable Abeji said, maybe because it's a 4-year mandate, certainly we cannot use just one event to come to a conclusion. But that was a very first important test, and they failed that test. The reason why they failed, Evans, it's not because maybe perhaps, it should have, gone to a vote, and even with their kind of disagreement, and eventually end up, just like what we saw in the election of the Right Honourable Speaker, eventually end up, in favor of the ministerial, nominees. But what I think Ghanaians expected was that, we didn't, we were not able to reconcile the contradictions, because on the one hand, there were a lot of issues that were brought during the vetting. And then immediately after that, a few days later, then you go and say, we support this. So people found that to be very, very difficult to reconcile. And I think, it is very important that, as the chairman of the committee said, it's okay to disagree, but make sure that you stand on your principle, disagree and follow that principle, and make sure that at least it's on record that you disagree. so that I'm sure if that was, I mean, what they did, maybe the bashing from their foot soldiers would not have been as harsh as we have seen it. But Evans, I mean, since I still have the floor, I think for me, what I would like to advise the leadership of Parliament, and including the Right Honourable Speaker here on the platform, I think we have been at this for some time now. Unfortunately, he has been part of the committee, I think, from the Fifth Parliament, as he indicated. Perhaps it is time that they start, after all this, to do some kind of reflection on the work of the committee and to see how best, going forward, because we are going to have, ministers, vetted by the committee, as time goes by and in future and so on. It's important that I think we try to get this right. So that, yes, do the politics, but let's make sure that the technical issues, are dealt with, and then we are, as objective as we can. Despite the politics. I have indicated and supported strongly the idea of decentralizing the work of this committee, so that just like we have in many places, the sector committees will look at this and then dig very deep into the technical issues and so on and so forth. So that, that relieves this committee from the very tedious task of having to, do a study of archaeology to zoology in order to be in a good position to vet.
I have a few minutes to wrap up. Let me ask Mr. Sowusu what he makes of the suggestion going forward in strengthening the work of the Appointments Committee. Mr. Sowusu, what do you say to the reflection suggestion?
Let me say that there's been this debate ongoing, and it has always raised the question that sitting here, I'm a lawyer. Besides that, is making me the technical knowledge about transport. Should a person nominated know everything within the ministry? That has been the issue that we have battled with. So the committee, I recall that in the Fifth Parliament, we're giving a guidelines of what to consider, what issues, what should the process bring out as whether the person is qualified, whether the person does not have any issues relating to morality, whether there are no adverse findings against the person in any adverse findings by any committee of inquiry. These are the critical things that the committee is supposed to consider. As to the competence, as people suggest, sometimes it's difficult to tell where we take it from and where we're taking it to, because indeed, I don't think that at the time you're nominated, you are expected to be as competent or be as very competent or know everything within the particular ministry. Some ministries are multifaceted, and even if you have information or experience or competence in one part, your competence in another may be lacking. So that has not been our main focus. Our main focus has been the constitutional qualification issues, the integrity issues involving the person. Okay. And I think that in this appointments committee, if we're going strictly by the guidelines, would have allowed many questions. Yeah. But this, for me, talking about the previous question as to the minorities squandering their strength.
Very brief, yes.
I think, in fact, that is not a fair suggestion to make of them. Indeed, what the numbers have done was to get Parliament, both sides, to work very closely together and strive to achieve consensus on all matters that matter. But it is not fair to expect that those who have 137 would always defeat those who have 138.
Okay.
That is expecting a miracle.
Okay. I'm grateful, gentlemen, for your time here on PM Express. Enjoy the rest of your evening.